I'm about to tell you a story that will absolutely shatter you. Not break you, shatter you. This is about a woman who spent 40 years making sure that nobody died alone. 40 years holding the hands of strangers in their final moments. And what happened on her last day of work will make you sob so hard you won't be able to breathe. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what language you speak. By the end of this story, you will be crying. You will call someone you love. And you will never, ever take for granted the people who care for us when we're at our most vulnerable. Are you ready? No, you're not. But we're going in anyway. But first, before I destroy you emotionally, if you want more stories that will remind you what it means to be human, what it means to love unconditionally, and what real sacrifice looks like, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash it, because the stories on this channel will change you. They will make you a better person. They will restore your faith in humanity. Subscribe. Notifications on. Let's go. Her name was Margaret. Everyone called her Maggie. She became a nurse in 1979 when she was 22 years old, fresh out of nursing school, bright-eyed, ready to save the world. Her first week on the job, she was assigned to the oncology ward. Cancer patients, terminal cases, people who came to the hospital to die, not to be cured. On her third day, she was assigned to a patient named Robert, 73 years old. Stomach cancer, stage 4. Weeks to live, maybe days. Robert had no family, no visitors, no one. His wife had died years before. His children had moved away and stopped calling. He was completely alone. Maggie walked into his room that morning to check his vitals, and she saw something that would haunt her forever. Robert was crying, silent tears running down his weathered face, staring at the ceiling, waiting to die, alone. Mr. Robert, Maggie said gently, "Are you in pain? Do you need more medication?" Robert shook his head. "The pain in my body I can handle," he whispered. "It's the pain of knowing I'm going to die alone that's killing me." Maggie felt something break inside her chest. This man, this human being, was going to take his last breath with nobody holding his hand. Nobody telling him it was okay to let go. Nobody there. She made a decision in that moment that would define the next 40 years of her life. "Mr. Robert," she said, pulling up a chair next to his bed. "You're not alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." She held his hand for 6 hours, through her entire shift, through her lunch break, through the end of her shift. She just held his hand. Robert died at 4:47 p.m. that day, and the last thing he felt was Maggie's hand in his. The last thing he heard was Maggie telling him, "You are loved. You are not alone. It's okay to go. I'm here." After Robert died, Maggie went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. But when she came out, she made a promise, a vow. From that day forward, she would make sure that nobody in her care died alone. Nobody. For 40 years, Maggie kept that promise. 40 years. If a patient had no family, Maggie was there. If a patient's family couldn't make it in time, Maggie was there. If a patient was scared, confused, in pain, Maggie was there. She held hands. Thousands of hands. Old hands. Young hands. Hands of grandmothers. Hands of children who should have had decades ahead of them. Hands of people who had no one else. She became known throughout the hospital as the angel of the night shift, because Maggie specifically requested the night shift. That's when people were most scared. That's when loneliness hit hardest. That's when people needed someone most. Her colleagues would ask her, "Maggie, how do you do it? How do you watch people die every week and not break down?" She would smile sadly and say, "I don't watch them die. I walk them home. There's a difference." Maggie never married, never had children. "The dying are my family," she would say, "and there are thousands of them who need me more than a husband or children ever would." Over 40 years, Maggie held approximately 10,000 hands. 10,000 people took their last breath with her fingers wrapped around theirs. 10,000 families received a phone call from Maggie saying, "I was with them. They weren't alone. They were peaceful. They were loved." She kept a journal, a small leather notebook where she wrote down every single name, every person whose hand she held. Robert, Patricia, James, little Emma, who was only 6 years old, Reverend Thomas, Mrs. Chun, Abdul, everyone. She would write their name, the date, and one sentence about them. Robert, he loved fishing and told me about the biggest trout he ever caught. Emma, she wanted to know if there were puppies in heaven. I told her yes. Abdul, he made me promise to tell his daughter he forgave her for not coming. I did. That journal was her most precious possession. 10,000 names, 10,000 souls, 10,000 moments of sacred trust. And then came 2019. Maggie turned 62. 40 years of night shifts. 40 years of holding death's hand. Her body was tired. Her heart was full. It was time to retire. The hospital threw her a retirement party. The entire staff came. Doctors, nurses, janitors, security guards, everyone who had ever worked with Maggie. The chief of medicine stood up to give a speech. Maggie has been the heart of this hospital for 40 years. She has taught us all what it means to care, what it means to love strangers as if they were family, what it means to be present in the hardest moments. Maggie, you are irreplaceable. Everyone clapped. Many were crying. Maggie smiled, embarrassed by the attention. But then something happened that nobody expected. The doors to the conference room opened, and people started walking in. Dozens of people, then hundreds. They kept coming and coming. Maggie stood up, confused. Who are all these people? The chief smiled. Maggie, these are the families. The families of the people whose hands you held. We reached out to them, asked them to come if they could. Over 800 families are here today. 800. Maggie's hands flew to her mouth. She couldn't breathe. One by one, they came up to her, each one with a story. You held my mother's hand when I couldn't get to the hospital in time. You called me and told me her last words. Thank you. You sat with my husband for 3 days straight when he was dying. You never left his side. You sang to him. You made him laugh even though he was in pain. Thank you. You held my 6-year-old daughter and told her there were puppies in heaven. That story got me through the darkest time of my life. Thank you. You were there for my father when I wasn't. I had abandoned him years before. But you didn't abandon him. You loved him when I couldn't. Thank you. For 3 hours, 800 people came up to Maggie. 800 families whose lives she had touched. 800 strangers who had become family. Maggie collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. 40 years of held in grief. 40 years of unprocessed loss. 40 years of carrying 10,000 deaths in her heart. It all came out, and those 800 people surrounded her. They held her. They cried with her. They thanked her. They loved her back. But there was one more surprise. The chief of medicine cleared his throat. Maggie, we have one more thing for you. A young woman stepped forward, maybe 25 years old, beautiful, smiling, crying. Miss Maggie, she said, her voice shaking, you don't remember me. But 19 years ago you held my hand. I was 6 years old. I had leukemia. I was dying. My parents were in another city and couldn't get to me in time. I was terrified, and you stayed with me all night. You told me I was brave. You told me God had plans for me. You told me it was okay to be scared, but I didn't have to be scared alone. Maggie stared at her, tears streaming down her face. I survived, the young woman continued. Against all odds, I survived. And every single day for the last 19 years, I have thought about you. The nurse who held my hand. The nurse who made me feel safe. The nurse who made me believe I was worth fighting for. She stepped closer to Maggie. My name is Emma. You wrote in your journal that I asked if there were puppies in heaven. You told me yes. That memory is why I became a veterinarian. Because you made me believe that even in the darkest moments, there is still room for joy, for love, for puppies. Maggie stood up and embraced Emma like she was her own daughter. Both of them sobbing. The entire room was crying now. 800 people watching this reunion between a nurse and the 6-year-old girl who wasn't supposed to survive. You saved me, Emma whispered. Not just my body, my soul. You saved my soul. Maggie pulled back and cupped Emma's face in her hands. Sweet girl, you don't understand. You all saved me. Every single person I sat with. Every hand I held. You gave my life meaning. You gave me purpose. I should be thanking you. After the party, Maggie went home to her small apartment. She sat in her favorite chair with her journal. 10,000 names. She opened it to the first page. Robert. He loved fishing and told me about the biggest trout he ever caught. She smiled. I hope you caught a bigger one in heaven, Robert. She flipped through the pages. Thousands of names, thousands of stories, thousands of moments where she chose to love when loving hurt. She had given 40 years of her life to people who were dying. She had sacrificed marriage, children, a normal life. For what? She looked at the photos from the retirement party spread across her table. 800 families. Emma, the little girl who survived. All those people whose lives she touched. And she understood. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was a privilege. The greatest privilege of her life. Maggie lived for 5 more years after retirement. She volunteered at hospice centers, visited nursing homes, held more hands, because that's who she was. That's who she would always be. When Maggie died in 2024 at the age of 67, her funeral was packed. Over 2,000 people came. 2,000 for a woman who never married, never had children, never owned a home, never got rich, never became famous. But she changed the world, one hand at a time. At her funeral, Emma stood up to speak. Now 30 years old, still a veterinarian, still alive because of Maggie. Maggie held 10,000 hands, Emma said. But here's what you need to understand. For each of those 10,000 people, Maggie wasn't just a nurse. She was the last face they saw, the last voice they heard, the last touch they felt. She was the bridge between this life and the next. And she made sure that bridge was built with love. Emma's voice broke. The world measures success by money, fame, power. But Maggie measured success by presence, by showing up, by being there when it mattered most, by holding hands when hands needed holding. She looked at Maggie's casket, covered in flowers. Miss Maggie, you told me when I was 6 that I was brave. But you were the bravest person I've ever known. Because you chose love every single day for 40 years. Even when love meant loss. Even when presence meant pain. Even when holding hands meant eventually letting go. The entire funeral erupted in applause. Standing ovation. For a nurse who never wanted recognition. Who just wanted to make sure nobody died alone. Now, let me tell you why I told you this story. Because right now, someone you love is alive. Your mother, your father, your grandmother, your friend, someone who cared for you, someone who held your hand when you needed it. Call them, right now, after this video. Call them and say, thank you for being there. Don't wait. Don't assume you'll have time later, because one day you won't. And if you work in healthcare, if you're a nurse, a doctor, a caregiver, hear me clearly. You are a Maggie. You hold hands. You show up. You make people feel loved in their darkest hour. And even if nobody ever throws you a party, even if nobody ever thanks you, what you do matters. It matters more than you will ever know. Before you go, I need you to do 6 things. First, hit that like button if you're crying. Second, share this video with every nurse, every caregiver, every person who has ever held someone's hand when they needed it. Third, share it with someone who needs to call their mom, their dad, their loved one today. Fourth, drop a comment. Tell me about someone who was your Maggie, someone who showed up when you needed them. Fifth, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because these are the stories that remind us what it means to be human. And sixth, go call someone you love. Do it now, before it's too late. Remember Maggie sitting with Robert on her 3rd day as a nurse, making a promise that would define 40 years. Remember 10,000 hands held. Remember Emma surviving and becoming a veterinarian because a nurse told her there were puppies in heaven. Remember 800 families showing up to say thank you. You don't have to hold 10,000 hands. You don't have to be a nurse. You don't have to give 40 years. You just have to show up. For one person, in one moment, when it matters most. Be there. Hold the hand. Show up. Love anyway. Because in the end, we won't remember the money we made, the things we owned, the status we achieved. We will remember the hands we held, the love we gave, the moments we were present. Be a Maggie. Hold a hand. Show up. Love anyway.